On behalf of WLP, which is a partnership of 20 women's organizations working at the grassroots level in the Global South, mostly Muslim majority societies, creating curriculum for leadership and political participation, which is very much needed at this moment in that part of the world, as you know, in 20 languages. On behalf of that group and their constituencies and all of you, I welcome her and welcome the creation of this wonderful entity. Michelle Bachelet's life provides material for several books. It's about a reasonably happy, uneventful childhood. It's about change that brings displacement, imprisonment, torture, loss, and exile. It's about hard work and hard-won success. It's about the travails of a single mother. It is lived in several languages and several cultures. It is about feminism and its costs. It's about the value and worth of knowledge and skill. It includes politics, winning elections, building constituencies, dropping low in the polls, and working up to the highest levels of public approval. She personally has experienced many of the things we have collectively lived through at one time or another. She has experienced much of what civil society has done, enjoyed, or suffered in various parts of the globe. She has looked at issues through the lens of the men who, for the most part, are still making most of the decisions that affect our lives. If anyone would know how to talk to them, how to present our case, and how to win an argument on our behalf, it is Michelle Bachelet. She's a special person at a special moment, taking up a task that has the potential to change all our lives for the better. It is my distinct honor and special pleasure to introduce to you Michelle Bachelet, physician, minister, president, and now the first director of UN Women.
Good morning, everybody. I am so grateful to Mahnaz Afkhami. I told her she made a very special summary of my life. She as founder and president of Women's Learning Partnership. Also thankful to the New School and to the many panelists and participants who are here today. And thank you for choosing to spend a precious day of your weekend pondering the way forward for UN Women. And it's particularly important for us because you have fought so much for this. And sometimes when you are in any activity in your life, urgency kills the possibility of thinking strategically and thinking the important things, the relevant things. So I think it's so grateful and so special for us that you will be doing that today. I want to express my particular appreciation to the many people here today who have been the visionaries and the negotiators that have forged the path to UN Women. On Thursday night, we celebrated UN Women. And today, I think we celebrate you. And you are no strangers to forging new paths to strengthen an action on women's rights. You are the ones that popularized the phrase, women's rights are human rights, a phrase we heard over and over again at UN Women's launch on Thursday. You are the ones that strategized, advocated, and secured visionary commitments at Beijing, the passage and accountability for implementing Security Council Resolution 1325 on peace and security, and so many other global and regional commitments to gender equality. When I hear the stories of young women as leaders amongst the so-called Facebook kids advocating for democratic transformation in Egypt and Tunisia, when I see parliaments and local councils that reach 30% or more representation of women, when I learn about new laws to punish perpetrators of domestic violence in many countries, and other local advances for women's rights, I am mindful of the tenacity and foresight that women like so many of you in this room have brought to this work for decades. Women's human rights defenders like yourselves are at the front line of standing up and speaking out for women's rights, including to have independently run safe houses, to have equal rights to land and inheritance, to access justice in line with commitments to zero. We have come this far because of your efforts, and we have reached an important plateau in the creation of UN Women. And this meeting today will hopefully provide a space to rest, savor the moment, and think together about the upcoming challenges and opportunities. Because the path ahead is an uphill one, so for those of you who are congratulating yourself on what you have achieved, let me say it very clearly, our work has just begun. This meeting could not come then at a better time. As you've heard me say often over the past week, over the next 2 months, we will draft out our first strategic plan to present to the UN Women Executive Board on June. That plan will benefit enormously from our discussions today and the ones who continue. I am glad that some of my UN Women colleagues are here today and they will be listening closely. And I want you to know that our UN Women colleagues in the field will also be having country-based and regional consultations. Our field network has begun these consultations in various regions because we thought we needed to define in a better, accurate way what UN Women will be doing. We will be doing this strategic planning. But we couldn't stay waiting until now. So you probably have read or heard me summarize my initial vision and action plan that we presented already in the first annual meeting in January of the Executive Board. And that plan as well benefited from consultation with many of you. For those of you who have not had the opportunity to read it, I would just tell you a very brief information that the Vision and Action Plan proposes that UN Women will focus on 5 priority areas. And it's based on my convincement that women will never have equal rights if women are not empowered. So for me, empowerment is the essential thing. Not the only thing, but it's essential. And if you can look at that through all different aspects, how women can fight against violence against them, how women can really be sure to be at the table at the peacekeeping negotiation, or how can we be sure that when countries are reshaping their countries and trying to rebuild the constitution, how women's needs and concerns and rights are represented there, we need to empower women. And both who have spoken before me have spoken about this, how important the political participation and the political empowerment of women is. So that's why our first, it doesn't mean that that's more relevant than the other, it's just I'm trying to name it. The first one I want to touch with you is what we could call political empowerment, or we can name it as expanding women's voices, leadership, and participation. Because we need to close the gaps in women's leadership and participation in different sectors. And when you see the World Gap Report, you see that we have been in some way or another, of course at the average level, close some gaps between boys and girls. When you see educational level, you see as an average in the world, 96 girls for 100 boys, or 98 and 100, depends on primary or secondary education. But when you go to political participation and political representation, is the worst of the indicator. Only 19% of all parliamentarians are women in the world, And that is a huge average from almost nothing to 58% in Rwanda, for example, or 38% in Nepal. And on the other hand, when you think on head of states or head of government, on 192 countries, there's only 19 head of states or head of governments. So this is one of the areas where we still are very far away of what we deserve, I would say. So that's one very important area. Ending violence against women and girls, of course, is essential. We'll continue working so hard on that by enabling states to set up the mechanism needed to formulate and enforce laws, policies, and services that protect women and girls, promote the involvement of men and boys, and prevent violence. We will be working, of course, and one initiative that we are currently exploring is advocating for countries to agree to a minimum service packages to spur implementation, and we will want your involvement in defining this. Because, you know, there are already a lot of countries with laws, but there is a gap of implementation. I mean, the law that hasn't transformed into changing reality. So we need to do much more about that. The third area, it will be bringing the voice of the women at the heart of the peace and security agenda. Again, there's the Security Council resolution. We last year celebrated the 10 years, but still very little progress. And we will be doing this through women's full participation in conflict resolution and peace processes, gender-responsive early warning, protection from sexual violence, and redress for its survivors in accordance with UN resolution. Many of you know that UN Women has been tasked with coordinating the development of a UN roadmap for implementation of Resolution 1325, another area that we will invite your close partnership on. And again, for me, this is essential empowerment, because who are sitting on the peace talks? The people who have the power, and where is the power? The guys who have the guns, and the people who have constituencies. So again, we could want to have a lot of women mediators, but if they don't have the power enough and the leadership, they will never be accepted as mediators. They will never be sitting in the table. So we need to empower them much more. We will start soon a program for 3 years where we will be working with 3 components. The first is to have a bigger group of women with mediation and negotiation capacities. So it will never be said again what I heard when I arrived to the UN. We don't have women with those skills. We do have, but we don't want nobody to have that excuse, at least. But it's not only a matter of number. I want to be very honest with you, because to be able to sit down and put parties that have been in a war, you have to be somebody who is respected, who have power, you have something to negotiate. So we need to find powerful, strong women, leaders that are respected by the parties. We will be also, because we know this is not that easy, and parties has to agree on who will be the mediator, we will be working with men who are mediators or will be mediators. So they will always have to meet with women at the countries and also have to bring their voices, their concerns, their needs to the peace talks and the negotiation. And third component, we'll be working, strengthening at the country level the capacity of women's organizations who have been dealing with this so they have a stronger voice. The fourth area that is not fourth in relevance, because for me probably is one of the most important ones, as the political one, because I also believe that women will never have equal rights if they don't have economic autonomy. So for me, economic empowerment is as important as political empowerment. And UN Women will work with governments, but also with national partners and multilateral partners to ensure the full realization of women's economic security and rights, including access to productive assets and full social protection. And the fifth, if I may say, it's sort of a tool and an area. It's making gender equality priorities central to national, local, and sectorial planning and budgeting. And I would link to this because when we discuss how we have been progressing, one of the problems that we have in many countries and that you don't find data disaggregated by gender. So you don't know exactly how to measure progress. So we'll be also working, building national capacities in terms of statistic that can be disaggregated by gender. But let me be clear, because that doesn't mean, when I focus on these 5 areas, it's because I try to understand which is the essential, which are the areas where UN Women have to lead. There are many other areas that many other agencies are already leading there. So we'll be working with them, but we don't intend to lead. We don't intend to step on no one's toes. We need to build synergies because we have so much work to do. And that's why we will be speaking out or supporting other actors working in critical areas such as reproductive rights, maternal health, environmental sustainability, or promotion of women's rights in response to HIV and AIDS pandemic, or, for example, women who migrate, domestic workers, and so on. But in many of these areas, you have ILO, you have WHO, UNA, AIDS, UNFPA, who are the leading ones, but we'll be building partnership and we'll be working together with them. At the same time, however, we must have certain areas in which UN Women will focus and invest. So these initial 5 priorities have met with a positive response from our UN partners, from the Executive Board, and we note that they are closely aligned to the recent Oxfam Noviv survey on what NGOs hope to see UN Women supporting. But beyond the absolutely critical discussion of what UN Women will focus on, it is essential that we also discuss how UN Women will work and how it strengthens its partnership with and support for women's networks and organizations at all levels. In my travels and meeting to date, I have heard many points reiterated by women's groups. You have told us, open up new and more spaces within the UN and with governments and other partners for us. Or don't compete with us for funding. Yeah. Don't drown us in bureaucracy. Work with government, but appoint staff who are committed to maintaining and expanding ongoing dialogue and partnerships with independent women's organizations. Ensure transparency at all levels, and particularly at country level. Have regular dialogue with women's groups of different types, and be sure to reach out beyond capitals to those rural and other areas that are the hardest to reach. I will tell you that one of my nightmares, if I may say, is to think how we reach those women who are the most vulnerable ones, and that usually they're not connected to organizations. They don't have internet. Because if we have funds, we have 2 trust funds, Gender Equality Trust Fund and the Trust Fund for Ending Violence Against Women. And everybody can apply to these trust funds. But probably we're not reaching the people who are in the more difficult conditions. So it will also be very important for us if you can also help us in that area. You have my commitment that I will keep all these things, and probably many more that you will mention, in mind, and try my very best to respond to these calls, because I'm so convinced we must maintain a very open dialogue. Now, let me close by posing some questions for you about areas where we need more of your thinking and insights. First, since the early days of discussions about UN Women, the important link between UN Women and civil society has been stressed. I have to tell you that during the difficult times of the dictatorship in my country, I worked in an NGO, so for many years as a pediatrician attending children who were suffering from violence or their parents were killed or disappeared or in prison. So I really know what it is to be part of an NGO and the difficulties sometimes that it means. In some countries where it seems like a threat to work on these kind of areas. We work with women and children, of course. What channels can we create for women's groups and networks to continue to be a dynamic partner to UN Women in guiding its strategic direction? I have instructed all of the regional heads of regional offices and sub-regional offices and people of the country office that they should organize, call for on the NGOs and essential non-governmental groups in each place
to form an advisory group. And I will do my own that will advise me. But I'm very interested to know if you have other or more innovative proposals to make on this issue. Second, the concern expressed by NGOs in the recent Oxfam Novib study about the accessibility of the UN system on the ground and the challenges encountered in partnering with the UN were very interesting for UN Women. How do we manage our partnerships and coordination mandate within the UN so that it leverages and generates maximum benefit for women's rights and gender equality? Third, and finally, I would be very interested in your thinking about the larger question in the effectiveness of implementation, the commitment of the Beijing Platform for Action through the gender mainstreaming strategy. We strengthen ministries of women's affairs to become effective at leveraging policies and programs for other branches of government. But from my own experience, not in my country because women, not in my case because women, of course, was important to me, but in many places, national machinery, gender machineries are the weakest. They are the one who receive the least budget. So we need to strengthen, but we need also to work and convince the Minister of Finance. You know, women's issue is a cross-cutting issue, and we need to involve everyone there. But, and we also think we need to bridge partnership between Ministers of Women's Affairs and parliamentary caucuses, supporting countries to develop national plans of action on gender equality, advocating for gender-responsive budgeting, and incorporating women's priorities in poverty reduction strategies and post-conflict reconstruction plans. That's what we have been doing until now. But is this getting us where we want to go? That's something we would like to hear from you. It is enabling us to reach the women who are, as I mentioned before, the most excluded and hardest to reach. It is enabling us, not just UN Women, but all of us, to respond dynamically and effectively to the opportunities and challenges that are most pressing for promoting and protecting women's rights. It would be wonderful if some of the speakers here today could reflect on some of those questions. Whether these questions or other, let me reiterate that the dialogue must continue and that a partnership based on mutual recognition and respect between UN Women and organizations and networks like those represented here today is essential to guaranteeing women's rights in all countries. So again, let me thank the organizer once again and wish you all a very fruitful and stimulating day. Thank you very much.